Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Zach. Here we talk about overlanding gear, builds, DIY, all sorts of stuff related to modifying your vehicle. Today, and kind of some of the past few videos, I've been working on a overarching bigger project of getting my electrical systems in check and just all encompassing better. So there are a lot of brackets and batteries and switch systems and things to consider on the market. And I've tried out a few different ones, and today I'm going to kind of show you a setup I think is one of the best, if not the best, for fitting the most stuff in these vehicles. So 4Runners in particular are not the smallest, they're not the largest, but I really try to maximize their space because it seems like it is never enough. So I'm going to kind of walk you through this under seat bracket made by Desert Does It, and it's pretty sweet. I like that it provides all this extra real estate for things, and it also allows you to run a bunch of cool electronics off of your dual battery and mount them close by. Or if you wanted, you could run them off of your primary battery as well. Just kind of depends on how you want to go about setting up your electrical system. But nevertheless, a lot of people, if they're going to mount an ARB twin in their engine bay, they mount it either in the dual battery slot, which is not really an option for a dual battery system, or they mount it right by their fuse panel, which I've come to dislike because it covers up the entire fuse box, which is kind of annoying in case you'd ever have a problem. It takes up an incredible amount of space there, so you can't ever reach to your engine, firewall pass through. You can't really run wires around there. There's just a lot of reasons why it seems to just take up too much space being put there. Not to mention most of the switch systems on the market mount there because it's very close to the battery and allows you to run, large amperage wires from your switch system to your starter battery. And that just makes for good opportunities for people with a less sophisticated build. So the nice thing about what I'm doing here is you could start small and work your way up. So if you've seen my Blaze Off-Road Garmin system video, that single switch system is like an awesome place to start for vehicle electrical. And everything I'm doing here, you could definitely build out in stages and it's not going to interfere at all. So there's a lot of pros and cons where this is quite modular. It's dual battery compatible. It allows you to run a Safety Hub 150, which is really nice. And also it allows you to run all kinds of wires through some different pass-throughs in your engine bay and everything be a little bit more accessible down the road. So for a lot of reasons, I really like this setup, and on my channel, I try a lot of different stuff. So, sometimes it just takes going through a couple different renditions to continue improving on these setups. But I want to give a shout out to Desert Does It for sending me this bracket system. I reached out to them and we were able to work out doing this video. And I want to give a shout out to Midland Radio. I've worked with Midland on a few different products over the past probably 2, maybe even 3 years. So they were one of the first supporters of my channel, and I want to thank them. So go check out those products. There's a bunch of different stuff I'm doing in this video. And so there's going to be lots of different products that I'm pulling from, and I'll try to link everything down below. So hopefully that's helpful for you all. So, all right, let's do a bit of an unboxing. I'm going to show you this radio. I'm going to show you mounting up my ARB twin. I'm going to show you retrofitting my Inflate system. I'm going to show you how you can use this little bracket made by Rago Fabrication with the Inflate system on this Desert Does It bracket. And I'm going to show you how I ran a switch to this system. We're going to go through a bunch of different stuff and how I got this all installed under my seat. So hopefully this video is interesting to you. I just try to share my product installs so that hopefully I can inspire you guys to put together your own designs and setups, and maybe this gives you some good ideas for how you're speccing out your system. So with that being said, let's jump into that unboxing. So maybe some of you remember this, maybe some of you don't, but this was a project I did where I basically tore apart this Midland radio because I wanted to plug into here and route a cable for it similar to the Ethernet style. At the time, this was their 50-watt radio, and it was the only one out and available, and it was called their MXT 500. Well, very shortly after finishing this project, they came out with the MXT 575, and so my whole project here was basically silly because the new one had an Ethernet port. And so I could use my pre-existing Ethernet port installed in my vehicle. So setting that aside, kind of want to showcase this new one. I wouldn't necessarily need to switch to this because in theory they're almost the same radio, but in something that's purely hidden with the screen on the handheld would be really nice. So I reached out to Midland. They've been supporters of me for a long time, and they're like, yeah, no problem, Zach. And so they sent this out. So what we're gonna do is open this up. I'll just show you what comes inside. I have a couple things already pre-installed on my vehicle that I'm going to use, and I'll link those down below if you want to do the same. But if we open this up, I'm sure you've maybe seen this radio before, but it's pretty good size. I think I can just piggyback off of my Desert Does It bracket underneath the passenger seat and plug this in there. So that's the plan. Basically comes with our handheld radio, which we've got our Ethernet extension, so we can plug this in near the driver. We've got a antenna with a really strong magnet that we won't be using. Here's a little antenna as well. We've got this little hook for the radio, but also don't need this because I've got one from the past. And then we have our power, which I've already routed to my fuse panel, but literally all this is a black and a ground wire that you would route to your battery. And then we've got this little plug like so. We may need to borrow this just in case the old plug isn't compatible, but I think it should be, so I'm not too worried. We'll see how that all pans out. But that's everything in the pack. It's really a pretty simple product that's fairly simple to install. We just gotta, you know, get out to the vehicle and actually install it. So we're gonna mount this basically underneath the passenger seat. If you didn't want to do that with your setup, you could put this in your center console or a couple of other places, you know, wherever you'd like. You could probably even fit this in the glove box if that was of interest. All right, so we got a couple of things going on in this box. Let's take everything out and then I'll talk through it a bit. Gotta try the candy. Candy's pretty good. All right, so these are our seat jackers. These are for the front and for the rear. And it looks like we get them in a couple of different sizes, which is cool. This is kind of funny, but I think I only ordered seat jackers that will work with the one seat with the bracket. So I guess the driver's seat's still gonna be lower, but the passenger seat is gonna be taller. That's funny. Okay, well, whatever. It's not a huge deal to me, but that is a little funny. There we go. So those match. So the black screws are going to be ones we use on the actual jacker themselves. And then the silver ones we will use for, so those black screws that come with it, those we'll use with the actual seat jacker. And then depending upon the amount that you want to use of spacers, will determine which of these bolts to use. So if you just use the shorter ones, which it looks like 0.25 or 0.5, you use the shorter bolt. And then if you're gonna go the full 0.75, then you'd use the longer bolt. For any shim combination above 1 inch, we are going to use the 60 millimeter, which is the longer one. If the seat rail hole does not line up, lift up the seat rail 0.25 inches and thread in the bolt a couple of threads. What we're going to be doing is mounting the air compressor to this bracket. B is basically these two widest holes, it looks like, that are closest to these two cutouts. So I'm going to move this stuff out of the way, and then we're going to get the ARB twin mounted up to this bracket before taking it out to the vehicle. So another interesting thing here, it says if you're using a single ARB or bi-air, use a 3/4 worth of inch of rear shims. For the twin ARB or more clearance, you will use a 1 1/4 inch of the shims, which is, at least it says 1 1/4 inch. The 3/4 will go between the floor and the compressor mount. The additional shim will sandwich between the compressor mount and the seat leg. Okay, I'm gonna put the minimum because I don't necessarily want
to take away headroom. So we're just going to use these two, the 3/4 and then the 1/2, so that we can get 1 1/4 inches. Alright, so we've got 2 holes drilled already pre-existing in this bracket, and I just drilled 2 little custom holes in this bracket here. My only concern is this radio is fairly tall, so these nuts might hit it. So I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna add 1 extra washer on the bottom, just to hopefully lower this just a teeny bit. Go. So now the front of this is just going to take the Ethernet cable, but what we can do is slide this in. Ooh. Well, the tricky part here is I want it facing that direction, but I don't. Probably not supposed to do that, but whatever. It works. Okay, this is so low profile, I really am not too worried about it hitting the seat. We will find out the hard way though, if that's a problem. I still have plenty of space to get in here and plug in my Ethernet cable, and then I'll zip tie it out of the way. We've got these here. This is why it's slightly offset, because plugging in these wires, I think it's going to take up a little space. Here's our power cable, etc. This is all good to go. Now what we got to do is figure out how to mount up my little air system here on the side. So in the past, I retrofitted a faster Inflate system onto these brackets here. So I like the system. It's done well for me, so I'd like to keep it. The only tricky part is actually getting this to coordinate with this system is really not its purpose. So trying to mount this in a convenient manner is going to be a little tricky, but not impossible, because nothing's impossible. So we just got to figure out how to do this exactly. We've got some air line included, and I'm just trying to figure out the easiest way to do this. All right, so we got that all tightened. I really like how that looks. Sorry for the rambling. Okay, so we got that. Can turn it on here, whatever. But that should be everything we need. Now what we can do is we can put this right angle in here, and that will allow us to poke through this hole, hopefully. And then we can hook up one of these little right angle fittings. So, all right, time to keep moving. Okay, this is maybe a little bit hard to show, but I think we're still in the clear here, because there's a hole here for our air to go in or out, and there's another hole over here. There's some mounting holes, so like we've got some, you know, space to breathe here, and this is the outlet. Like if you were to use their OEM one, I think that's right there. So like we're basically close. I think we're gonna clear. And we've got some seat jackers going under this, so I don't think we're going to run into the floor. I also hope that I'm not really sorry when we get out to the car and none of this fits, but I think we'll start with this for now. I'm going to put this little fitting in here, and then I'll test fit it before I actually put that little hose on the top. that goes with the actual air compressor in case we got to take it all apart again. For now, I'm liking the way this looks, that's for sure. Because if this works, it's going to be sweet to have all this stuff still hooked up and interior to the vehicle so it's weather resistant. And then obviously just having that functionality still is sweet too. So hopefully it all works. Now to just get everything mocked up in the vehicle. But we'll twist this in before getting out to the vehicle, and then yeah, time to start getting stuff installed. I'm pretty pumped. All right, I'm gonna twist this on and we'll get out to the vehicle. Okay, so my apologies, it's starting to get dark again, but we've got the seat jacker here. We're gonna put that through the OEM spot just like that, and then we're gonna bolt it down. You can see here, there's this hole and then there's the threaded hole. So this little piece will go into there and then we'll thread down that. This black bolt then we'll use for our bracket and the seats eventually. Back here, here's our OEM threads. We'll put one spacer in, and actually we'll probably use the full 2 spacers because we're gonna probably need that space for this given all my sound deadening. So we'll use the 3/4 inch first, and then we'll use another 1/2 inch and 1/4 on top of that. And then we can just set this bracket in place. I've got this wire routed here from my engine bay for the compressor. And then after that, I think we'll basically be good to go. We may just have to route a couple of these cables from over here in the center console for my radio, but that shouldn't take too long. And then we'll be basically ready to go. Okay, so we've got most of this installed here. Now what we're gonna do is I need to hook up some of these wires to the engine bay and also just connect some of these different accessories. So these are all wires from my engine bay that I've kind of strategically picked out. So we've got it's tough to say because the design of the OEM harness for this ARB compressor seems to be sufficient, but also a little bit lousy. I don't know. I can't quite tell based on the Blue Seas wire gauge chart, which is typically what I go by. Depending upon how long your wire is, you need a certain gauge to run a certain current. And so we've got this, harness from Blue Seas, but the bulk of these wires are not even 8 gauge. So they all seem to be 10 gauge as far as I can tell when I'm looking at the diameters. These aren't labeled, but I'm pretty confident we have 2 10 gauge red wires and 2 10 gauge black wires, and the total length of this harness was almost the same. Regardless, I ran some beefier wires, so we've got 1 ground return, 2 red wires to feed current, which is way overkill, and then I've also got a 14 gauge ground here as well, and then a red power cable that's separate that will provide power to my switch, which is going to go right here. So this is kind of the plan. I think if I was being ultra overkill, I would have ran 2 of these black ground wires, but it just didn't seem necessary given the fact that there was one, I think 10 or 8 gauge wire. Like these aren't, I don't know exactly what gauge these are, but there was a fatter wire that these 2 grounds ran to that I clipped, and then there's the 2 red wires. So I don't know, I'm kind of trying to do my best on this design, but do what you got to do to set up your system. But this is kind of my plan, so I think I should be fine. This is also a fairly short harness. The ARB compressor is rated for 40 amps per compressor, but I don't think it ever draws even close to that. So I want to say it draws typically like 25 to 30, but it's rated for 40. So that's kind of the plan. We've got the FasterFlate system mounted all up here. This is the wifey air block that I've cut down to fit here and have a nice place to bolt to on the back. So hopefully that's easy enough to see. So I'll try and link some of these products, but it's also kind of custom at this point. This fits great. There's way more room here than I really need.
So I think you could kind of mount it at any height and you'd be fine. Some people run their air compressor switch to their switch system, but since my tire inflate deflate system is all going to plug in like right here, it kind of seems like unnecessary to put my switch anywhere else but right here. So we're just going to wire in a manual rocker switch. I think the ARB compressor comes with one, but I must have thrown it away or something. I can't find it anywhere. So I just bought a little single throw, single pole Blue Seas switch here, and I can link that down below as well. And we'll get this sort of wired up here. So again, this is slightly custom, but there may be different options depending upon how you want to do this. This is the bracket made by Rago Fabrication called the surge plate. You can run this if you relocate your, whatever you call it, the windshield wiper fluid tank. So that's what I did. This is the aqua tank from Rago Fabrication. This plate typically fills in this whole area, but it's super challenging to work around it. So because I decided to mount up some different materials to this plate, I really cut it up a bit. So I've got lots of places to route larger gauge wires. So,
well, I think that turned out pretty nice. Put the safety hub here and just mount it right up there. Just like that. The foot for mounting these brackets right here, I'm super tempted to just cut all this off, but I'm gonna leave it just for now in case there's something I want to put there, like, you know, this isn't the fuse panel I would probably put here, but you know, you can imagine it might be something like this. So that looks pretty good. Liking how that looks. Cut this out a little bit. I've got a metal blade for my Hercules oscillating saw that I just got from Menards because I needed blades. And then I cleaned it up with my angle grinder. I kind of discovered these flap discs when I was out at C4. Figured something existed, but had never really used them or, you know, heard about them that much. But this brushless Hercules angle grinder, I use this thing all the time. I don't know how I got by without an angle grinder, but cleaned this all up, made it nice and shiny and smooth, and that should be perfect.
I have no idea what I'm going to use this space for. In theory, I could have just like cut it out here, but just in case I want to mount something here, I left it there for now. But this should work pretty well. There's the larger amperage connections on this side, lower amperage fuse connections on this side, and then this is a big grounding bar. So all we got to do now is just connect up wires, put terminals on, etc. I've got this sweet tool that Harbor Freight sent me that is fairly basic, but it's just got a, honestly, just a tiny bottle jack on the end here that helps you pump a really strong force up here to crimp terminals. So you can see these are labeled for 8 gauge, but over here we've got some 0 gauge, so on and so forth. For this size, it's not maybe as pertinent that I use this, but when you're doing like, you know, 4 gauge or 0 gauge battery cables, this thing is absolutely awesome, and it's not too expensive. So I'll link this down below if you're interested in it as well, or you do a lot of battery cables. All right, well, after a bunch of wiring, we've got our 2 connections here for each compressor. We've got a 40 amp fuse for each. Then we added just a tiny trigger wire power basically right there. And we ran the ground to here. So everything should basically be wired up in this Safety Hub 150. So far, this is the only fuse box I'm running. I believe Blaze Off-Road is coming out with a Safety Hub and Garmin switch all in one bracket, which would be a pretty sweet setup as well. So that may be an option in the future you could run. But yeah, we got everything out here set up. That is the grommet we're going through, trying to make the wires and everything as short as possible. And just a friendly reminder that if all this wiring stuff is, you know, not really your forte, or you just don't feel comfortable doing it, it's worth the drive to Blaze Off-Road to have him do the work. So then if we wander back here, I'll just kind of do a little demonstration. So we got everything wired up. The air compressor is connected. I believe if we set this like this, the air can just flow freely. You can click this on button to see the PSI.
But we got the switch wired up here as well, a purple wire to the harness, and then you can see the little wiring diagram here, which is load, or the purple wire on the bottom, power, and then ground. And power and ground are ran within this big harness that I ran down underneath the carpet and into this plastic here to run to the front. So yeah, this should all be basically ready to go. Let's do a couple demonstrations. All right, here we go. So we've got the handheld radio plugged into our little Ethernet port right there on the side, and this accordion or whatever, I don't know what you call this, but this spiraling sort of cable you can just stretch out to pull over to, you know, the other side when you're driving. But yeah, everything seems to be working. This switch I just left out of the little spot until I knew it was ready, but you can click like so. And then if we just slightly close this so there's a little less or a little more restriction, a little less airflow, you can start to sometimes get the PSI to read. There you go, there's that much pressure that builds in there. All right, so yeah, here we go. We've got everything zip tied into place. Everything seems to work. Switch works, and yeah, I'll show you kind of what this looks like with everything closed up and good to go. But yeah, looks great. As a friendly reminder, if anything looks like it's gonna rub on some metal, make sure you clean that up appropriately. But everything is looking pretty good. This will be all underneath the seat, so you won't see basically anything here. That's the compressor, and then show here. That turns on. We can change the channel up here. That side button we can press. That all works. So everything seems to be working perfectly how we want it. Now all I got to do is just put the seat back, and I'll show you what this looks like on the side of the seat. So let's get after doing that. So it's getting dark outside, so I came into the garage. Sorry for kind of the lighting and situation, but these were all hooked on underneath here. It's my understanding they're going to get in the way of our ARB compressor setup, so you kind of reroute them above. I undid all their little, you know, holder clips too. In addition to these, there's like a little tab on top of each clip like that you pull back to get them to snap out of here. It's kind of hard. They say use a flathead. I just use my nails because that seemed to work better than the flathead. But all of these are up here, so I think what I'm just gonna do is I'm gonna plug them into the harness and zip tie them up and out of the way before I put the seat down. So yeah, just wanted to showcase that because it was a little bit confusing. I think these ones will be okay, but these are the ones that really hang down. And in theory, you could probably even bend up this bracket a bit if you really wanted to. All right, so just for a final look and sort of demonstration here, it's kind of how much it sticks out. I don't know how much of this plastic we can really put back. There's this plastic piece that sort of cleans up the side of the seat here that I just completely removed. I don't know if you can keep that with just a normal air chuck, but I don't mind it being gone to have all that space to work. So there you go. That's what it looks like. We turn this on, everything works. So I'd say that's good to go. All right, well, it's kind of just a demonstration situation at this point. After using this system a little bit over the last weekend, a couple things to just reflect on. These seat jackers are definitely going to be nice for somebody with longer legs. It lifts the seat off of the ground a bit. However, if you don't have an adjustability in height in your seat, these may take away some headroom that could be annoying for taller people. I'm like 6'2", 6'3", and I sit driver almost always, and it has an adjustable up and down height. So I've considered maybe getting some seat jackers on the driver's side just for comfort reasons, but I haven't tested that out. Obviously this is on the passenger side, and my wife is like 5'4" or 5'5",
I don't exactly know, but she's a lot shorter than me, and so sitting in that seat is really not a problem for that to be slightly taller. So, you know, those are just a couple things to keep in mind when doing this install. But otherwise, when you mount everything under there, it's hard to even tell that it's under there. And my side area for my 4 tire system and my switch are all super accessible. So I'm really happy how that all turned out and finished off. So yeah, like I said at the beginning of the video, I'll have all these products that I used along the way, some of the tools, etc., all linked down below. And if you got any questions for me, feel free to comment them down below. And if you're not really too comfortable with doing a setup like this, but you want to do something of this sort, Blaze Off-Road has done a few of these system installs in the past, so you could always go check him out and just take your vehicle to his place. A couple other things I guess I should mention here is I didn't thoroughly go over the install of the Midland radio Ethernet pass-through that I had previously installed a while back. I'll link that video up in the top corner somewhere so you can go check that out. But I ran power from that same safety hub 150, and then I ran that Ethernet pass-through with a Ethernet cable I had laying around in a different video, but it's not overly different from what I did on the actual air compressor, you know, wiring up as far as routing cables to the engine bay. So figured I should just mention that in case you were wondering, like, hey, you never really explained that, or how you kind of did that. And so yeah, that was basically done in a different video. I didn't want to be repetitive, but also if some of you are wondering, that's where that is. So alrighty, thank you so much for the support, everyone. I've got another video kind of in tandem with this coming soon for my interior, and hopefully that will be out fairly soon. But in the meantime, thank you so much for the support. I really appreciate it. And if you don't follow me on Instagram, go check me out on Instagram. I post a lot of sort of cinematic reels and photos I take, and I think it's cool, sort of inspiring content that's not quite the same as my long form sort of talking kind of content that I do here on YouTube. So if you're into that, go check me out on Instagram. I've got an account on there that I post pretty frequently on. So alrighty, thanks for the support. I'll catch you all in the next video.